Hello and welcome. Paul Bailey here. Someone recently asked me what it is that I do now, and my profession is a real estate professional. That term encompasses a few different fields in real estate. And as a licensed realtor in Ohio, I help people buy, sell, and invest in homes. I also manage our rental properties for long-term tenants and short-term guests through platforms like Airbnb and VRBO, and I also manage remodeling projects for our own interests of either fix and flips or remodel and rent. When I consider all the people I've met in my life, I realize that I've met them through various stages of life. Throughout my college and my 20s, I played so much slow pitch softball in the area. My group of friends expanded not only to include my teammates, but the teams we played against every weekend. And after college, in a year in Charleston, South Carolina teaching, I moved back to my home area, so I know many people around because we grew up together through our school years. And then I went back to teach at the same high school I graduated from, and I became friends with my teachers from high school and also the new teachers that came along since my time was away. Early in my teaching career, I was coaching the cross-country team and the distance runners on the track and field team. And then that led my passion for running to expand, which led me to various running events myself. And somewhere along the way, fantasy football hit me, and I became tired of getting last in a league. So I started to listen to fantasy football podcast, and not just a football podcast, but it was specifically for fantasy football. And the advice that one year was to draft Tim Tebow and keep him on my team. And with that quarterback, I was propelled out of last place, always in last place, to become a playoff team. I didn't win the championship that year. I did lose in the first round, but I understood the constant amount of information that was available to us through technology. And at that point, I was commuting almost 45 minutes each way to work, so I started listening to real estate podcasts and audiobooks. It's not football season all year long, so during the off season, I had more time to listen to podcasts, and so that's when I picked up the real estate podcasts and audiobooks. And so the more I learned about real estate, the more I understood the value that I could have, initially for myself and my family, but also for my friends, neighbors, and the impact that it would have on our community as I grew into the real estate field. And so throughout all my years of teaching, I always had a Nelson Mandela quote hanging on my wall. And it said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And I think that all students thought that I just had to have that because I was a teacher. But it's still a core belief of mine, as I still consume information constantly to become better in my profession as a real estate professional. Hey, I wanted to tell you about the first house that I purchased. It was a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. I purchased it with the intent to fix and flip it, and it just didn't flip. Purchased it in July of 2007, just before the global financial crisis, and man, I did a nice remodel to it, put a new roof on it, and new flooring, new paint, new carpet. I redid the kitchen. Had this open concept between the living room and the kitchen. Redid the bathroom, and it had a nice yard. It was a fenced-in backyard, but it just didn't sell. And that was the tough part. That was a failure to me. I'd done this, and it just didn't sell. So what I decided to do was I rented it out. And just picked up a tenant, and the price that I was getting per month was less than what I was paying. So the first time that I tried to sell it was my first failure. And now that I'm renting it and I'm losing $50 a month, it's my second failure. And I'm like, man, I'm just looking for a way out. So when that tenant left, what I did was I just tried to sell it again. And then nobody was interested. That tenant moved out still during the Great Recession, and it was just tough. It was tough for selling houses at that point. And so I was able to pick up like a real estate acquisition group, and their whole plan was they would lease it from me for 3 years. They would put a tenant in there and work with that tenant to build their credit. And so that's what they did. They either had 1 or 2 tenants in there, but my whole goal was I was like, man, this company they're just going to buy it at the end of 3 years and we're going to move on from it. And so I don't know how many tenants they actually had in there. I just left it up to them. And then so when the 3 years came along, they contacted me and they said, hey, we don't have a buyer for this. It's just going to come back to your possession. And so then after 3 years, that's what happened. I took it back over. And at that point, I was like, man, I don't know what to do with this thing. But I had a brother who was old enough to move out on his own, so he rented it. But thank goodness this time I charged him enough rent to pay for like my mortgage, my taxes, and my insurance. I was not losing money this time. And he lived in this house for a couple years. It was his first house away from our folks, and he lived there, and then he moved on after that. And at that point, I was like, yes, it's time for me to sell this house. The market was a little bit better, and I was like, oh, it's going to sell. And so basically, I just tried to sell it for what I owed on. I just said, here, let's just sell it for this low price, and still, like, very little interest. Not even any interest from any investors, which, looking back at the time, I feel like they missed out on that one. But and the reason why I say that is because the realtor that was listing it for me, he said, hey, it's not getting any traction. It's just sitting here. You're paying the bills each month. How about I just try to find you a tenant? Because he was a property manager. And so I said, yeah, sure. That sounds great. And it worked out because I didn't have to find the tenant. He was a professional, and this was his job. And he had experience doing this. Not only did he have rentals of his own, but he also managed properties for some other people. And so he took this one on. And for the first time after like 10 years, I was cash flowing on this property. And so I was excited about that. And we just let that ride. That tenant stayed in that property for 6 years. And when that tenant moved out, I was a full-time real estate professional. And so I had that house. We redid the floors on it, repainted it, upgraded like a toilet, and just did some things that needed done, just kind of freshen it up, and put a tenant in there, and that guy was real happy about it. So what I'm trying to say is that even though I was able to fail 3 times with this tiny little house, this is my starter house, right? My first time home as an investment. I failed with it because I couldn't sell it after flipping it. I failed with it because I was losing money off my first tenant. I failed with it because that lease didn't work out with that real estate acquisition group. And so, and that's the versatile part about real estate is after 10 years, the value of it goes up. And I bought the house for $16,000, and it appraised for nearly $70,000 the last time that I had it appraised. So I say that's a win. I had to go through a couple failures to get there, but it looks like it's doing pretty well for us right now. So the question is, why real estate? And the answer is that out of all of the assets, real estate is the basic necessity of life. We need food, we need water, and we need shelter. And real estate fulfills that shelter. Because once we consume the food and the water, they no longer have value to us. Real estate is not about timing the market, it is about time in the market. And I think that consideration for buying other assets is secondary to buying your primary residence. There's a lot of value in buying your primary residence. And once you do that, then I think people decide to invest either in more real estate or in other assets. And however, if a person at minimum can maintain their primary residence from the day they purchase it until the day they sell it, they should be able to sell it for more money than they bought it for. Typically, the longer a person resides in it, the house appreciates to a higher value, which then also allows the sale price to go higher. And then also, here's the thing that you don't really think about, is that in the IRS tax code, after at least 2 years of living in the house out of the last 5 years, the net gain from the sale of your primary residence, it's tax-free. Up to $250,000 for a single person and up to $500,000 for a married couple. And so when we consider the other parts of our life that are taxed, like this is not one of them. If we can live in that house for 2 years and sell it, there's no taxes that need to be paid on that once we sell it. There's some other benefits to owning a house, such as tax deduction for your property taxes. And if applicable, if you have a mortgage, there's some tax deductions for your mortgage interest. Owning your primary residence helps to stabilize your living costs, and it helps to equalize those losses from rising inflation. Your principal and your interest part of your mortgage will constantly stay the same. Up until, if it's a 30-year mortgage, then it stays the same for 30 years. However, your property taxes, your home insurance, and then also the maintenance fees that come with owning a home, those will typically rise throughout time. But the one thing that always stays the same, well, 2 things, I guess, is your principal and your interest part of that. However, if you consider the cost of renting, rent typically goes up over time. And if you consider the cost of waiting to buy your home, the cost of a home price typically goes up over time. And so sitting on the sidelines doesn't really help you out if you're able to afford a house and make that monthly payment. And like I said before, maintain the home to the status where you purchased it until the point where you're going to sell it. And if you can improve that home, that also helps out as well. Initially, the cost of a mortgage may be higher than renting. However, after some time, that will not be the case. And it has been said many times, don't wait to buy real estate. You buy real estate and wait. When you're ready to grow your wealth through real estate, better call Paul and let me help you with that. Tell me about your first home purchase in the comments below. I'd like to hear about it. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.